The wall was rotting at the seams, held together by grime and years of abandonment. But when the 10-year-old boy pried it open in that rain-soaked alley, he found something that would bring a billionaire CEO to his knees, a photograph that proves some sins never wash away, no matter how much money you throw at them. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening in Portland, Oregon, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and making the world look like it was melting. 10-year-old Timothy Ross pressed himself against the brick wall of Chen's grocery, his thin jacket doing absolutely nothing against the cold that seeped into his bones. His sneakers, 2 sizes too small and held together with duct tape, squished with every step, and his stomach growled so loudly he was sure the whole city could hear it. He'd been out here for 6 hours now, ever since school let out. Not that anyone at school noticed when he left or cared where he went afterward. Timothy had perfected the art of being invisible, of slipping through hallways and classrooms like a ghost. It was easier that way. Easier than explaining why his lunch account was always empty, why he wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, why he sometimes fell asleep at his desk, because the apartment was too cold to sleep in at night. His mother was at home, if you could call that one-bedroom disaster, in the Parkrose neighborhood home. She'd be on the couch where he'd left her this morning, staring at the television that barely worked, occasionally lifting a bottle to her lips. She'd been like that for 3 years now, ever since his father walked out. Just walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. Didn't leave a note. Didn't leave money. Didn't leave anything except a hole in their lives that his mother tried to fill with cheap vodka and cheaper wine. Timothy learned quickly that if he wanted to eat, he had to figure out himself. The alley behind Chen's grocery was his usual spot. Mr. Chun, the owner, was a kind man with sad eyes who sometimes left day-old bread in boxes by the dumpster. He never said anything to Timothy, but the boy knew it was deliberate. The bread was always in clean boxes, wrapped in plastic bags, placed where the rain couldn't reach it. Tonight, though, Timothy had arrived too late. The box was empty except for crumbs. His stomach twisted again, this time painfully. He'd had half a carton of milk at school lunch. That was it for the day. He leaned his head back against the wet brick and closed his eyes, trying to remember what his father's face looked like. The memory was getting fuzzy around the edges, like an old photograph left in the sun too long. That's when he saw it. At first, he thought it was just another piece of trash. God knew this alley had plenty of it. Crushed beer cans, cigarette butts, soggy newspapers, the occasional syringe that made Timothy walk very carefully. But something about this particular piece of trash caught his eye. It was wedged between the dumpster and the wall, partially hidden by a collapsed cardboard box. Timothy approached cautiously. The city had taught him to be careful about everything, to trust nothing. But curiosity, that dangerous, persistent thing that kept him reading books at the library when he should have been looking for food, pulled him forward. It was a wallet. Not just any wallet, but one that had clearly seen better days. The leather was so worn it was almost falling apart, held together by what looked like decades of grime and water damage. The stitching was coming undone in places, and the whole thing had a greenish tinge that suggested it had been lying in that alley for a very long time. Timothy glanced around. The alley was empty except for him and the rain. He bent down and picked up a wallet, surprised by how light it was, how fragile it felt in his small hands. For a moment, he considered leaving it there. His mother always said that taking things that didn't belong to you was wrong, back when she still said things that made sense, back when she was still really his mother. But curiosity won. He opened it carefully, afraid it might disintegrate in his hands. The inside was just as damaged as the outside, the fabric lining stained and rotting. There was no money. He'd expected that. No one would leave money in a wallet and then lose the wallet in an alley. But there were other things. A library card, so faded he could barely make out the name. Catherine Ross. His breath caught. Ross was his last name. Portland had plenty of Rosses. He knew that, but still, it felt like a coincidence too strange to ignore. There was a business card, too, though the writing was almost completely illegible. He could make out parts of it. Thornton Enterprises, 503, a Portland phone number, and then he found the photograph. It was tucked into a small pocket, protected by a plastic sleeve that had somehow survived the years better than the rest of the wallet. The photograph itself was creased and faded, but still clear enough to see. It showed a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark hair and a bright smile, holding a baby. She was standing in front of what looked like a small house with a porch. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that had smudged but was still readable, someone had written, "Catherine and baby Timothy, 1997. Our new beginning." Timothy's hand started to shake. Not from the cold this time. That was the year he was born. Catherine. His mother's name was Catherine. The baby in the photograph was wrapped in a blue blanket, the same blue as the one his mother kept in her bedroom closet, the one she sometimes held when she'd been drinking and crying. He'd asked her about it once, and she'd told him it was his baby blanket, from when he was born, before everything went wrong. His mind raced. This couldn't be his mother's wallet. Could it? How would it have ended up here, in this alley, rotting away like garbage? His mother never came to this part of town. She barely left the apartment anymore. Timothy flipped through the wallet again, looking for anything else, any other clue. There was a small piece of paper, folded so many times it was barely holding together. He unfolded it carefully, his cold fingers struggling with the delicate task. It was a receipt, dated March 15th, 2015, 10 years ago, from a restaurant called the River Place. He'd never heard of it, but the receipt showed a meal for two, expensive from the look of it. Wine, steaks, dessert. At the bottom, someone had written in pen, "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry it has to be this way." T. Just the letter T. Timothy's heart was pounding now. He looked at the photograph again, at the young woman who might have been his mother 28 years ago, before life had beaten her down, before his father had left, before the drinking started. She looked happy in the photograph, genuinely happy, like she believed the caption on the back, "Our new beginning." What had happened between that photograph and now? What had turned his bright-eyed mother into the hollow woman on the couch? Timothy sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Why would his mother have Theodore Thornton's business card in her wallet? Why would Thornton write her a note apologizing for something? And why would that wallet end up rotting in an alley for God knows how many years? Find what you were looking for? Timothy jumped. Mrs. Patterson had approached so quietly he hadn't heard her. Yeah, sort of. He quickly closed the browser window, suddenly afraid that someone might see what he was researching, might ask questions he didn't know how to answer. Mrs. Patterson's eyes were kind but concerned. "Timothy, honey, is everything okay at home?" It was a question she'd asked before, always gently, always with that look that said she already knew the answer, but was hoping he'd tell her anyway. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Patterson." She didn't believe him. He could see that. But she didn't push. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a $10 bill. "I was going to ask if you could help me organize the children's section later, but I'm going to be too busy. Consider this payment in advance, okay?" Timothy knew she was lying. The children's section was perfectly organized. Mrs. Patterson did this sometimes, found excuses to give him money. He should have been embarrassed, should have refused, but his pride had died somewhere around the same time his father left. Pride didn't fill empty stomachs. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking the money. "You're welcome, sweetheart. And Timothy, if you ever need anything at all, you can talk to me. You know that, right?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. After Mrs. Patterson walked away, Timothy sat at the computer for another hour, diving deeper into Theodore Thornton's life. He found news articles, interviews, photographs of Thornton at charity galas and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The man was everywhere in Portland's business scene, a fixture of success and wealth. But there was something else, too, buried in an article from 2015, the same year as the receipt. A small piece in the business section about a lawsuit that had been quietly settled. A former employee claiming wrongful termination and discrimination. The details were vague, sealed by the settlement, but Timothy noted the date, March 2015, the same month as the receipt. His mother had worked as a secretary when Timothy was younger. He remembered that, vaguely, She'd worked for different companies, never staying anywhere too long. Had she worked for Thornton Enterprises? Was that the connection? Timothy printed out a photograph of Theodore Thornton. It cost him 25 cents from his newly acquired $10, and carefully folded it into his backpack next to the wallet. Then he spent the last of the library's open hours in the children's section, pretending to read but actually planning his next move. He needed to talk to his mother, really talk to her, when she was sober enough to understand the questions and sober enough to answer them honestly. That meant catching her in the morning, before she started drinking, in that narrow window between waking up and the first bottle. The rain had stopped when Timothy left the library, but the streets were still wet, reflecting the neon signs of the businesses he passed. He walked slowly, taking the long way home, passing through neighborhoods where people who looked like they had normal lives walked dogs and carried grocery bags and laughed with their children. What would that be like? To have a mother who smiled, who made dinner, who asked about your day and actually listened to the answer. To have a father who came home instead of disappearing like smoke? Timothy tried not to think about it too much. That way lay a sadness so deep he was afraid he fell into it. He'd never climb back out. By the time he reached his apartment building, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too beautiful for a neighborhood this broken. He climbed the stairs, each step heavy with dread. Inside the apartment, his mother was awake, but in bad shape. She was sitting at the small kitchen table, her hands shaking as she lifted a coffee cup to her lips. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale. The television was off. That was unusual. Usually, she kept it on constantly, using the noise to drown out whatever thoughts haunted her. Mom. She looked up at him, and for a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, he saw something in her eyes that reminded him of the woman in the photograph. Present, aware. Timothy, sit down. He sat, confused by her tone. She sounded almost normal. I need to tell you something, Catherine said. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. I've been having dreams. About the past. About things I thought I'd forgotten. She paused, staring into her coffee cup like it held answers. About your father. Timothy's breath caught. His mother never talked about his father. Never. It was an unspoken rule in their apartment. That subject was forbidden territory. What about him? Timothy asked carefully. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Finally, she spoke. Your father, he wasn't a good man, Timothy. I know you probably have memories of him. Probably think he was something special, but he wasn't. He was weak and selfish. And when things got hard, when we needed him most, he ran. Why did he run? Because of money. Because we didn't have enough of it. And he didn't want to work for it. Her voice was bitter now. He wanted the easy life, wanted to be rich without earning it. And when that didn't happen, when reality set in, he couldn't handle it. Timothy thought about the wallet in his backpack, about Theodore Thornton's business card, about the receipt with his mysterious apology. Should he ask? Should he tell his mother what he'd found? Before he could decide, Catherine continued. I used to work for a man, a very important man. This was before you really remember, when you were just a baby. She looked at Timothy now, her eyes focusing on him in a way they hadn't in years. I was his executive assistant. Made good money, really good money. We had a nice apartment, nice things. Your father didn't even have to work much. I was supporting us. What happened? Timothy whispered, I got pregnant with you. And suddenly, everything changed. The man I worked for, he made me an offer. Catherine's voice cracked. He said he'd help us. Said he'd make sure we never had to worry about money again. But there were conditions. What kind of conditions? Catherine's face crumpled, and Timothy saw tears forming in her eyes. Real tears, not the hollow crying she did when she was drunk. He wanted me to give you up, she said. Said he and his wife couldn't have children. Said they'd raise you right, give you everything. All I had to do was walk away. He offered me $200,000 to disappear from your life. The kitchen seemed to tilt. Timothy gripped the edge of the table, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under him. I told him no. Catherine continued, her voice breaking. "I told him you were my son, and I would never give you up for any amount of money. And he fired me. Just like that. After 6 years of working for him, after everything I'd done, he fired me and made sure I'd never work in Portland again. He blacklisted me, called it a mutual separation, made me sign papers saying I'd never speak about what happened." "Who?" Timothy asked, though he already knew the answer. Who was he? Catherine met his eyes. Theodore Thornton. The name hung in the air between them like a curse. Timothy slowly pulled the wallet from his backpack. His mother's eyes widened when she saw it, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where did you get that?" she gasped. "In an alley, behind Chen's grocery." Timothy placed it on the table between them. "I found it yesterday." Catherine reached for the wallet with trembling hands, opening it like it might bite her. She pulled out the photograph, and a sob escaped her throat. "I thought I'd lost this," she whispered. "I thought it was gone forever. This was when we moved into our first real apartment. When I thought everything was going to be okay." She looked at Timothy, tears streaming down her face now. "You were such a beautiful baby. So perfect. And I swore I'd protect you, that I'd give you a good life no matter what." "The receipt," Timothy said, "from the River Place. March 2015. That was him." Catherine nodded. "He asked to meet me one last time. Said he wanted to apologize, wanted to make things right. I thought—" She laughed bitterly. "I thought he was going to offer me my job back, or at least some kind of severance. Instead, he gave me a check for $10,000 and told me to leave Portland. Said it would be better for everyone if I just disappeared. Did you take the money?" "I took it, and I hated myself for it. Used most of it to pay off debts, the rest to stay drunk enough to forget what I'd done." She touched the photograph gently. "I must have lost the wallet that night. I was so upset, so angry. I walked around for hours after that meeting. Just walked until my feet bled. I didn't even realize it was gone until days later." Timothy felt something building in his chest. Anger, hot and fierce. He can't just do that. He can't just ruin people's lives because he wants something he can't have. He can do whatever he wants. Timothy. Men like Theodore Thornton, they own the city. They own everything. Catherine closed the wallet, pushing it back toward him. "Promise me you'll stay away from him. Promise me you won't do anything stupid." But Timothy was already thinking, already planning. Theodore Thornton had destroyed his mother's life, had driven his father away, had reduced him to poverty and desperation because he couldn't handle being told no. And he'd done it all from his mansion and his boardrooms, probably never thinking twice about the family he crushed. "I promise," Timothy lied. His mother seemed to accept this, too exhausted and emotionally drained to question him. She stood up, swaying slightly, and headed toward the couch where her bottles waited. Timothy watched her go, watched her reach the familiar comfort of alcohol, watched her slip away from that brief moment of clarity back into the fog where she lived now. He looked down at the wallet, at the photograph of his mother's young, hopeful face, at the business card that had brought him to this truth, at the receipt with its damning apology. Theodore Thornton thought he'd buried this story, thought $10,000 and a signature on a non-disclosure agreement were enough to make the problem disappear. But he'd forgotten about the wallet. He'd forgotten that evidence has a way of surviving, of floating back to the surface no matter how deep you bury it. And he'd never imagined that a 10-year-old boy would find it. Timothy made a decision then, sitting in that kitchen with the sound of his mother's crying drifting from the living room. He was going to make Theodore Thornton face what he'd done. He didn't know how yet. He was just a kid, poor and powerless and invisible to people like Thornton. But he'd figure it out. He had to, because someone needed to make things right. And if it wasn't going to be the adults, if it wasn't going to be the courts or the system or anyone with actual power, then it would have to be him. Timothy spent the entire weekend planning. While his mother drifted in and out of her usual haze, he sat in his corner with the wallet, studying every detail, thinking through every possibility. By Monday morning, he had the beginnings of a plan, risky, probably stupid, but it was something. The Thornton Enterprises headquarters was downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that stretched 30 stories into the Portland sky. Timothy had looked it up on the library computer, memorized the address, studied photographs of the building until he could picture every detail. It was the kind of place where people like him didn't belong, where security guards probably stopped you at the door if you didn't look like you had business there. But Timothy had learned something important over the years of being poor and invisible. Nobody really looked at kids. Adults saw what they expected to see. A well-dressed child was assumed to belong somewhere. A poorly dressed one was assumed to be lost or shouldn't be there. So the trick was to look like you belonged, to walk with confidence, even when your heart was hammering and your hands were shaking. Timothy used $3 from Mrs. Patterson's money to buy a white button-down shirt from Goodwill. It was too big, but he tucked it in carefully and wore his least damaged pair of jeans. He borrowed soap from the gym at school and washed his hair in the sink, combing it as neatly as he could. When he looked at himself in the mirror, he didn't look rich, but he looked clean, presentable, like a kid who might be dropping something off for his parents. He skipped school on Tuesday. His mother wouldn't notice. She barely noticed when he was home, let alone when he wasn't. He took the bus downtown, watching the city transform from his rundown neighborhood to the polished commercial district where money lived and breathed in every building. The Thornton Enterprises Tower was even more imposing in person. Timothy stood across the street, staring up at it, feeling small and foolish. What was he doing? He was a 10-year-old kid with a rotting wallet and a story nobody would believe. Theodore Thornton was a billionaire with lawyers and security and power that Timothy couldn't even comprehend. But then he thought about his mother's face when she'd seen the photograph, the way she touched it like it was the most precious thing in the world. He thought about the woman in that picture, young and hopeful, believing in new beginnings. He thought about what Thornton had taken from her, from both of them. Timothy crossed the street. The lobby was exactly as intimidating as he'd imagined. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, abstract art that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. People in expensive suits moved through the space with purpose, their shoes clicking against the marble, their faces set in expressions of importance and urgency. A security desk stood between Timothy and the elevators. A guard sat behind it, a large man with a bored expression, scrolling through his phone. Timothy took a deep breath and walked forward, clutching his backpack, trying to look like he belonged there. "Can I help you?" The guard's voice was flat, uninterested. "I'm here to see Mr. Thornton," Timothy said, his voice steadier than he felt. The guard looked up now, really seeing him for the first time. His eyes traveled from Timothy's too big shirt to his worn shoes, and his expression shifted from bored to suspicious. "You have an appointment?" "No, but it's important. It's about—" Timothy hesitated, then decided to go with the truth, or part of it. "It's about my mother. She used to work here." "Kid, Mr. Thornton doesn't see people without appointments. And he definitely doesn't see kids." The guard was already looking back at his phone, dismissing Timothy. "Please, I just need 5 minutes. I have something that belongs to him." "Sure you do. Look, kid, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but you need to leave. Now, before I call the police and tell them there's a trespasser." Timothy felt panic rising in his chest. This wasn't working. He'd been stupid to think it would. What had he expected? That he'd just walk in and demand to see one of Portland's most powerful men? That Thornton would see him and suddenly feel guilty? That anything would change? "I found his wallet," Timothy blurted out, louder than he intended. Several people in the lobby turned to look. The guard's expression changed. "What?" "Mr. Thornton's wallet. I found it, and there's stuff in it, important stuff. Things he probably wants back." The lie came easily, smoothly. Timothy had always been good at stories, at making people believe things. The guard studied him more carefully now, weighing whether this was worth his time. Finally, he picked up the phone on his desk. "Yeah, it's Ron at the main desk. I've got a kid down here claiming he found Mr. Thornton's wallet. Yeah, I know how it sounds, but okay, yeah." He hung up and pointed to a leather chair near the elevators. "Sit there. Don't move. Someone's coming down to talk to you." Timothy sat, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He'd gotten further than he'd expected. But now what? What would he say when whoever was coming down asked to see this wallet he claimed was Thornton's? The elevator dinged, and a woman emerged. She was in her 30s, impeccably dressed in a black suit, with blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her heels clicked against a marble as she approached Timothy. Her face set in an expression of barely concealed annoyance. "I'm Jennifer Hastings, Mr. Thornton's executive assistant," she said crisply. "I understand you claim to have found Mr. Thornton's wallet." Timothy stood up, feeling very small next to this woman, who radiated efficiency and impatience. "Yes, ma'am. May I see it?" This was the moment. Timothy could back out now, admit it was a misunderstanding, run out of the building and never come back. Or he could commit to this insane plan. He pulled out the rotting wallet from his backpack. Jennifer Hastings' eyes widened slightly. She took the wallet carefully, as if it might contaminate her. Her nose wrinkled at the smell. The thing still reeked of garbage and decay. "Where exactly did you find this?" "In an alley, behind a grocery store, in my neighborhood." She opened the wallet carefully, pulling out the business card, the library card, the photograph. Her expression changed as she looked at the items, something flickering across her face. Recognition? Concern? "This isn't Mr. Thornton's wallet," she said slowly. "But these items, they may be relevant to company matters. Where did you say you found it?" "Behind Chen's Grocery, in the Parkrose neighborhood." Jennifer was quiet for a moment, studying Timothy with new interest. "What's your name?" "Timothy Ross." He saw it. The flash of recognition in her eyes when she heard his last name. She knew. Somehow, she knew who he was, or at least knew the story. "I see." She closed the wallet carefully. "Mr. Ross, I need to make some calls. Would you mind waiting here for a few minutes? I want to see Mr. Thornton. I want to talk to him about what's in that wallet." "That's not possible. Mr. Thornton is a very busy man, and he doesn't meet with—" She stopped herself, recalculating. "Let me make some calls. Please, just wait here." She walked away quickly, still carrying the wallet, pulling out her phone before she'd even reached the elevator. Timothy watched her go, feeling like he'd just set something in motion that he couldn't stop. The guard was watching him now with renewed interest. Other people in the lobby were glancing his way, whispering. Timothy tried to look calm, tried to look like he belonged there. But inside, he was terrified. What had he done? What if they called the police? What if they called his mother? What if— The elevator dinged again. This time, 3 people emerged. Jennifer Hastings, another man in an expensive suit who Timothy didn't recognize, and someone who made Timothy's breath catch in his throat. Theodore Thornton himself. He was older than in the photographs Timothy had seen, his hair more gray than blonde now, lines etched deeper around his eyes and mouth. But he had the same commanding presence, the same air of absolute confidence. He was wearing a suit that probably cost thousands of dollars, and he moved through the lobby like he owned it, which Timothy supposed he did. Thornton's eyes locked on Timothy, and something passed across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He approached slowly, the other 2 flanking him like guards. "Timothy Ross," Thornton said. "It wasn't a question. You look just like your mother did at your age." Timothy hadn't expected that. He'd expected anger, denial, maybe having security throw him out. He hadn't expected Thornton to acknowledge knowing his mother. "You remember her," Timothy said. "Of course I remember Catherine. She was one of the best assistants I ever had." Thornton gestured to the man beside him. "This is Richard Hayes, my attorney. Jennifer you've met. Why don't we go somewhere more private to discuss this?" Timothy wanted to refuse, wanted to demand a talk right here in the lobby where people could see, could witness whatever happened next. But Thornton was already walking toward a conference room off the main lobby, and Timothy found himself following, drawn by a combination of fear and curiosity. The conference room was smaller than Timothy expected, but still luxurious. A long table, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls. Thornton sat at the head of the table and gestured for Timothy to sit across from him. Jennifer and Richard Hayes stood near the door, watching. "I understand you found something that belongs to your mother," Thornton said. His voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. "I found her wallet. The one she lost 10 years ago. after you paid her to leave Portland. Timothy saw Jennifer shift uncomfortably. Richard Hayes' expression hardened. Thornton was quiet for a moment, studying Timothy the way someone might study an interesting puzzle. You're very direct. I appreciate that. It's a rare quality, especially in someone so young. My mother told me everything, Timothy continued, his voice stronger now, about how you wanted her to give me up, about how you fired her when she said no, about how you ruined her life. Is that what she told you? Thornton leaned back in his chair. That I ruined her life? Didn't you? I offered her a choice, Timothy. A difficult choice, yes, but a choice nonetheless. She made her decision, and I respected it. The severance package I provided was generous, more than generous. What she did with that money, how she chose to live her life afterward, that wasn't my responsibility. You blacklisted her. She couldn't get work anywhere. I did no such thing. Your mother had a habit of emotional outbursts. She made accusations against me and against this company that were completely unfounded. When potential employers called for references, I was honest about her performance and her conduct. That's not blacklisting. That's honesty. Timothy felt anger building in his chest, hot and fierce. This man was so calm, so reasonable sounding, making it all sound like his mother's fault, like she brought this on herself. You tried to buy my mother's baby. You tried to buy me. I offered to adopt you and give you opportunities your mother couldn't provide. There's a difference. Thornton leaned forward now, his blue eyes intense. Look at you, Timothy. Look at your clothes, your shoes. You're thin. When was the last time you had a proper meal? Your mother is an alcoholic who can barely take care of herself, let alone a child. I could have given you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, a real future. Instead, you're here, living in poverty, wearing thrift store clothes, probably going to bed hungry most nights. Tell me, which choice would have been better for you? The words hit Timothy like physical blows because they were true. He was hungry. He did wear thrift store clothes. His mother was an alcoholic who'd given up on life. Everything Thornton said was factually accurate, but it felt wrong somehow, like truth twisted into something ugly. She's still my mother, Timothy said quietly, and she loved me enough to say no to you. Something flickered in Thornton's expression, respect maybe, or annoyance. Yes, she did. He stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. I'm going to be honest with you, Timothy, because I think you deserve honesty. I did want to adopt you. My wife and I, we couldn't have children. We'd tried for years, spent hundreds of thousands on treatments, all of it unsuccessful. When Catherine got pregnant, when I saw you as a baby, I thought maybe this was the answer. Maybe this was how I could have the family I'd always wanted. He turned back to Timothy, but Catherine said no, and I was angry enough to make some poor decisions, to say some things I shouldn't have said. I didn't blacklist her, but I didn't help her either. I could have written her a glowing recommendation. I could have made calls, opened doors. I didn't, and for that, I suppose I do bear some responsibility for what happened to her. It was the closest thing to an apology Timothy had heard, but it still didn't feel like enough. What do you want, Timothy? Thornton asked. Why are you really here? Did you come for money? Because I can write you a check right now. I can make sure you and your mother are taken care of. I don't want your money, Timothy interrupted. I want you to admit what you did, publicly. I want you to tell people that you tried to buy a woman's child, that you ruined her career when she refused, that you're not the great philanthropist everyone thinks you are. The room went very quiet. Jennifer and Richard exchanged glances. Thornton's expression hardened. That's not going to happen, he said flatly. Timothy, I understand you're angry. I understand you want someone to blame for your situation. But what you're asking for would destroy everything I built. My reputation, my company, my marriage, all of it would be gone. And for what? To make you feel better? To give your mother some sense of vindication? To tell the truth? The truth is complicated. The truth is that I made mistakes, yes, but so did your mother. The truth is that life is messy and people make difficult choices that hurt other people. And sometimes there's no villain, just circumstances and bad timing and human fallibility. Thornton walked back to the table, placing both hands on it, leaning toward Timothy. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. I will set up a trust fund for you. $5 million, accessible when you turn 18. I will pay for your education, private school starting immediately, college, whatever you want. I will ensure your mother gets into a proper rehabilitation program, one of the best in the country. And I will do all this anonymously through shell companies and trusts, so nobody needs to know about our history. He straightened up. But in exchange, you leave here today and never speak of this again. You don't go to the press. You don't tell anyone about what happened between your mother and me. You take the help I'm offering, and you let the past stay in the past. Timothy looked at the man standing before him, powerful, confident, holding all the cards. This was the person who'd broken his mother, who condemned him to a childhood of poverty and hunger and shame. And now Thornton was offering to fix everything, to make it all go away, as long as Timothy agreed to stay silent. $5 million. Private school. His mother getting help. It was everything they needed, everything that could change their lives. All he had to do was pretend none of this had ever happened. Timothy thought about his mother, about that photograph of her holding him. So full of hope. He thought about her on the couch, bottle in hand, that hope completely extinguished. He thought about what she'd given up for him, how she'd said no to Thornton's money and power because she loved her son more than comfort. She made a choice based on love, not money. And now Timothy had to make his own choice. No, he said. Thornton's eyebrows raised. No, I don't want your money. I don't want you to buy my silence the way you tried to buy me. Timothy stood up, his legs shaking but his voice steady. You think you can make this go away, but you can't. That wallet, those receipts, my mother's story, it's all evidence. And I'm going to make sure people know what you did. Richard Hayes stepped forward. Young man, I strongly advise against. Are you threatening me? Thornton's voice was cold now, all pretense of warmth gone. Because threatening me would be very foolish. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, investigators, connections. I could make your life very difficult. You already did. Timothy shot back. You can't make it worse than it already is. He walked toward the door, his heart pounding. Jennifer stepped aside to let him pass, her expression unreadable. Timothy, Thornton called out, you're making a mistake. Take the deal. Take the money. You can't win this fight. Timothy turned back one last time. Maybe not, but at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I didn't sell out like you expected me to. He walked out of the conference room, through the lobby, past the security guard who watched him with confusion. He pushed through the revolving doors and out onto the street, where the Portland rain had started again, washing over him like baptism. Timothy had no idea what he was going to do next. He had no money, no power, no resources to fight a billionaire. But he looked Theodore Thornton in the eye and said no, the same way his mother had years ago. And somehow, that felt like victory enough for now. What he didn't see was Richard Hayes pulling out his phone as soon as he left. Didn't hear the conversation about managing the situation and protecting the company's interests. Didn't know that he just made himself a problem that very powerful people now needed to solve. Timothy was halfway home on the bus when he realized he'd made a terrible mistake. Not the confrontation with Thornton. That still felt right, still felt necessary. But he'd left the wallet with them. The evidence. The only proof he had of any connection between his mother and Theodore Thornton. He pressed his forehead against a rain-streaked bus window, fighting back panic. How could he have been so stupid? Jennifer Hastings had taken the wallet to make some calls, and he'd just let her walk away with it. Now Thornton had the photograph, the business card, the receipt, everything Timothy needed if he was going to expose what had happened. The bus lurched to a stop in his neighborhood, and Timothy got off, walking slowly through the familiar broken streets. Kids played in puddles despite the rain, their laughter echoing off the graffitied walls. Mrs. Chun was sweeping the sidewalk in front of her grocery store, same as she did every afternoon. Everything looked normal. But Timothy felt like his world had shifted, like he'd crossed some invisible line. and there was no going back. His mother was asleep on the couch when he got home, an empty bottle on the floor beside her. Timothy stood in the doorway watching her breathe, her face slack in sleep, looking older than her 46 years. What would she say if she knew what he'd done? Would she be proud that he'd stood up to Thornton? Or would she be terrified of what might come next? Timothy didn't wake her. Instead, he went to his corner and pulled out a notebook, one of the few school supplies he actually owned. He started writing down everything he could remember from the wallet, everything he'd seen and photographed in his mind, the dates on the receipt, the exact wording of the note, his mother's library card number. Every detail might matter. He was so focused on writing that he didn't hear the knock at first. When it came again, louder, his mother stirred on the couch. "Timothy," she mumbled, disoriented. "Someone at the door?" Timothy's stomach clenched. Nobody ever knocked on their door. They didn't have friends, didn't have visitors. His mother didn't even answer the door when bill collectors came around anymore. "I'll get it," he said quickly, moving toward the door. He looked through the peephole and saw a woman he didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, holding a briefcase. She didn't look like a bill collector. She didn't look like anyone from their neighborhood. "Who is it?" his mother called from the couch. Timothy opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Timothy Ross? My name is Patricia Kimball. I'm a social worker with the Department of Human Services. I need to speak with you and your mother about some concerns that have been brought to our attention." Timothy's blood ran cold. "Concerns? May I come in? This really should be discussed inside." "What kind of concerns?" His mother was beside him now, awake suddenly, fear sharp in her voice. Catherine knew what a social worker's visit meant. Timothy could see it in her eyes. Patricia Kimball's smile became more fixed. "Mrs. Ross, there have been reports regarding Timothy's welfare, his attendance at school, his living conditions, signs of neglect. I'm here to conduct a home assessment and speak with both of you about these issues." "Who reported us?" Catherine demanded, but Timothy already knew. Thornton. This was Thornton's doing. He'd said he had resources, said he could make their lives difficult. Timothy just hadn't expected him to move this fast. "I'm not at liberty to say, but the reports are serious enough that I need to come inside and evaluate the situation. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have to come back with the police and a court order." Catherine looked at Timothy, her face pale. Then she unhooked the chain and opened the door. Patricia Kimball walked into their apartment with the measured gait of someone conducting an inspection. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the stained couch, the flickering television, the empty bottles Catherine hadn't bothered to hide, the dishes piled in the sink. Timothy watched her expression shift from professional neutrality to concern to something that looked like pity. "Mrs. Ross, perhaps we could sit down and talk?" Patricia gestured to the couch. They sat, Catherine and Timothy on the couch, Patricia in the single chair that wobbled because one leg was shorter than the others. She pulled out a tablet from her briefcase and began asking questions. When had Timothy last been to a doctor? Did he eat regular meals? Where did he sleep? How much did Catherine drink? His mother tried to answer, tried to make things sound better than they were, but her hands shook and her words slurred slightly, and Timothy could see Patricia noting everything on her tablet. "Timothy," Patricia said, turning to him, "how are things at school? Do you feel safe here at home?" It was a trap question. Timothy knew it immediately. If he said yes, he was lying. Anyone could see this apartment wasn't safe, that his mother wasn't capable of taking care of him properly. But if he said no, he'd be confirming that he needed to be removed from his mother's care. "I'm fine," he said carefully. "We're managing. I see you're wearing clothes that don't fit properly. When was the last time you had new clothes?" "I don't need new clothes. These work fine." Patricia's expression softened with something that looked like genuine sympathy. "Timothy, I know you want to protect your mother. That's natural. But my job is to protect you. And from what I'm seeing here, I have serious concerns about your welfare." "You can't take him," Catherine said suddenly, her voice breaking. "He's my son. He's all I have. Mrs. Ross, I can see that you love your son. But love isn't enough if you can't provide proper care. The apartment is unsafe. I can see mold on the walls. The heating doesn't appear to be working properly. There's clear evidence of substance abuse. I'll stop drinking, Catherine interrupted desperately. I'll get help. I'll get a job. Just don't take him. Please. Patricia was quiet for a moment, her fingers hovering over her tablet. Mrs. Ross, have you sought treatment for your alcohol dependence? I know, but I will. Starting today. I promise. Unfortunately, promises aren't enough. I need to see concrete evidence of change, of stability. Patricia looked at both of them. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file a report recommending that Timothy be placed in temporary foster care while you undergo a mandatory evaluation and treatment program. If you successfully complete treatment and can demonstrate that you're capable of providing a safe, stable home, then we can discuss reunification. No. The word came from Timothy, loud and fierce. You can't do that. Timothy, I understand this is difficult. You don't understand anything. This is because of him. Because of Theodore Thornton. He called you, didn't he? He told you to come here. Patricia's expression flickered, just for a second, but Timothy saw it. Recognition. Confirmation. My cases come from various sources, Patricia said carefully. But regardless of how I became aware of this situation, the concerns are valid. This apartment is not a suitable environment for a child. So you are working for him. Timothy stood up, anger overriding his fear. He couldn't buy me this morning. So now he's trying to take me away from my mother anyway. Don't you see? This is exactly what he wanted 10 years ago, and you're helping him do it. Timothy, sit down. You're not making this easier. I don't want to make it easier. I want you to leave. We're fine without your help. You're clearly not fine, Patricia said firmly. She stood as well, closing her tablet. I'm going to recommend immediate placement. Someone from the department will be here tomorrow morning to pick you up. In the meantime, Mrs. Ross, I suggest you use this evening to explain to Timothy what's happening and help him prepare. Make this transition as smooth as possible. She walked to the door, but Catherine grabbed her arm, tears streaming down her face now. Please, please don't do this. He's all I have. He's the only good thing I ever did. Patricia gently removed Catherine's hand. Then get sober. Get help. Prove that you can be the mother he needs. That's the only way you'll get him back. She looked at Timothy. I know you don't believe me right now, but this is for your own good. You deserve better than this. She left, closing the door behind her with a quiet click that sounded like the closing of a coffin. The apartment was silent, except for Catherine sobbing. She sank to the floor, her body shaking with the force of her tears. Timothy stood frozen, his mind racing. Tomorrow. They were coming tomorrow, to take him away, to put him in some stranger's home while his mother went to rehab. If she even agreed to go. I'm sorry, Catherine gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry, Timothy. I tried. To be a good mother, but I couldn't. I failed you. I failed at everything. Timothy knelt beside her, putting his arms around her thin shoulders. She felt fragile, like she might break if he held her too tight. You didn't fail me, Mom. You kept me. You said no to Thornton when he wanted to take me away, and that's the bravest thing anyone's ever done for me. But he's doing it anyway, Catherine said bitterly. He's taking you anyway, and I can't stop him. I have no power, no money, no way to fight him. Timothy thought about that, about power and money, and the way Theodore Thornton wielded both like weapons. Patricia Kimball had come so quickly, within hours of Timothy's visit to Thornton Enterprises. That kind of response time didn't happen naturally. Thornton had made a call, pulled strings, activated the very system that was supposed to protect children, and turned it into another tool for getting what he wanted. But there had to be a way to fight back. There had to be someone who cared about truth more than money, who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Timothy helped his mother to the couch, then went to his corner and picked up the notebook where he'd been writing down everything he remembered from the wallet. It wasn't evidence. Not really, but it was something. A record. A story. Mom, he said slowly, an idea forming. What if we told your story? What if we made it public? Made it so Thornton couldn't hide what he did? Catherine looked at him with red, swollen eyes. Who would listen? Who would believe us over a billionaire? The press. Newspapers. Someone has to care about the truth. Timothy, people like us, we don't matter to the press. And even if they did listen, Thornton would sue us. His lawyers would destroy us. We'd end up with nothing. We already have nothing, Timothy pointed out. What else can they take? It was a harsh truth, but it was true. They lived in a moldy apartment, ate irregular meals, wore thrift store clothes. They had nothing to lose because Thornton had already taken everything that mattered. Catherine was quiet for a long time. Then she stood up, swaying slightly, and walked to her bedroom. She came back carrying a shoebox, taped shut and covered in dust. I saved everything, she said, sitting back down and placing the box between them. All the paperwork from when I worked for Thornton, my employment contract, the termination papers, emails I printed out before they locked me out of the system. I don't know why I kept it. I told myself I was going to sue him someday, but I never had the money for a lawyer, and the non-disclosure agreement I signed was ironclad. She opened the box, and Timothy saw papers inside, dozens of them, organized in folders with dates written on the tabs in his mother's handwriting. But if you're going to be taken from me anyway, Catherine continued, her voice steadier now, if Thornton is going to win regardless, then maybe we should at least try to make sure people know the truth. Maybe we can't stop him, but we can make sure he doesn't get to do this in the dark. Timothy pulled out his phone, a cheap prepaid one that barely worked, but it had internet access. He started searching for local journalists, people who covered business and corruption, people who might care about a story like theirs. He found several names, but one stood out. Rachel Winters, an investigative journalist for the Portland Tribune, who'd written several articles exposing corporate misconduct. Her email was listed at the bottom of one of her articles. Timothy started typing, his fingers moving fast, trying to get the words out before he lost his courage. Dear Ms. Winters, my name is Timothy Ross. I'm 10 years old, and I have a story about Theodore Thornton of Thornton Enterprises that I think you should know. He tried to buy me from my mother when I was a baby, and when she refused, he destroyed her career and our lives. Now he's using the foster care system to try to take me away from her because I confronted him about it. I know this sounds crazy. I know you probably get emails from crazy people all the time, but I have evidence, documents, receipts, emails, a whole paper trail. And tomorrow morning, they're coming to take me away to foster care. And once that happens, I don't know if anyone will ever hear this story. Please, if you care about truth, if you care about holding powerful people accountable, please meet with me and my mother tonight. We'll show you everything. Timothy Ross. He included his mother's phone number and their address, then hit send before he could second-guess himself. What did you do? Catherine asked. I emailed a journalist. I told her everything. Maybe she'll care, maybe she won't, but at least we tried. They sat together in the dim apartment, waiting. The television flickered in the background. Outside, the Portland rain continued its endless drumming against the windows. Timothy thought about foster care, about being taken to live with strangers, about his mother alone in this apartment or locked away in some rehab facility. His phone buzzed. Timothy grabbed it so fast he nearly dropped it. An email from Rachel Winters. Timothy, this is a serious allegation against a very powerful man. I need to verify your story before I can do anything with it. I'm finishing up another assignment, but I can be at your address in 2 hours. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't post anything on social media. Don't do anything that could compromise the story. If what you're telling me is true, we need to be very careful about how we proceed. See you at 7 p.m. Rachel Winters. Timothy showed his mother the email. Catherine read it twice, then looked at him with something he hadn't seen in her eyes in years. Hope. This could really happen, she whispered. We could actually tell our story. And Thornton can't stop us, Timothy added. Once it's out there, once people know the truth, he can't make it disappear. They spent the next 2 hours going through the shoebox, organizing the documents, preparing to show Rachel Winters everything. Catherine didn't Didn't even look at the bottles lined up by the couch. She was focused, present in a way Timothy barely remembered. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Rachel Winters was younger than Timothy expected, maybe 35, with dark red hair pulled back in a ponytail and intelligent green eyes that took in everything. She carried a shoulder bag and a voice recorder, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. "Mrs. Ross Timothy," she said, shaking their hands. "Thank you for reaching out. I have to tell you up front that Theodore Thornton is one of the most powerful men in this city. If we're going to do a story about him, I need absolutely bulletproof evidence. I need documents, witnesses, dates, times, everything verifiable, because the moment this story goes public, his lawyers will come after all of us with everything they have. Do you understand?" "We understand," Catherine said, "and we have everything you need." They spent the next 3 hours at the kitchen table, Rachel asking questions, taking notes, examining documents, recording their testimony. She was thorough, professional, occasionally stopping to verify facts on her laptop. She took photographs of the documents, made copies of everything, built what she called the evidentiary foundation of the story. "This is good," she finally said, sitting back in her chair. "This is really good. The paper trail alone is damning. Employment records showing your sudden termination right after Timothy's birth. The settlement check from exactly the date Thornton claims he just ran into you randomly. Your therapy records from that time noting work-related trauma and inappropriate workplace demands." She looked at Timothy. "And your part, confronting him today, his immediate retaliation through social services. That's the current hook. That's what makes this news instead of just history. A billionaire using the foster care system as a weapon against a 10-year-old who dare to challenge him? That's a story that will make people pay attention. So you'll write it?" Timothy asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I'll write it. But I need to make one thing very clear. Once this story publishes, your lives will change. The media will descend on you. Thornton's lawyers will attack your credibility. You'll be in the spotlight, and it won't always be kind. Are you both prepared for that?" Catherine looked at Timothy. Timothy looked back at his mother. They both nodded. "We're prepared," Catherine said. "We've been silent for 10 years. It's time for the truth." Rachel packed up her materials, but before she left, she gave them her personal cell phone number. "The story will run tomorrow morning, front page. I've already talked to my editor. He's on board. It's going to be big, and it's going to be fast. Theodore Thornton is going to wake up tomorrow to find his reputation in tatters." She paused at the door. "And Timothy, when social services comes for you in the morning, they might think twice about taking you once they see that front page, because it's going to look exactly like what it is, retaliation against a child for speaking truth to power." After Rachel left, Timothy and his mother sat together on the couch in silence. The bottles were still there, still within reach, but Catherine didn't touch them. "Are we going to be okay?" Timothy asked quietly. "I don't know," Catherine answered honestly. "But for the first time in 10 years, I feel like we have a chance. Like maybe we can fight back. Like maybe we matter." She put her arm around him, and Timothy leaned against her shoulder, feeling more like her son than he had in years. Tomorrow would bring chaos. Journalists, lawyers, maybe social workers, maybe police. Tomorrow would bring Theodore Thornton's fury and his resources and all the power he could muster. But tonight they'd told the truth. Tonight they'd refused to stay silent. And somehow that felt like the beginning of something. The rain continued outside, washing the city clean. And for the first time in his young life, Timothy Ross believed that maybe, just maybe, the truth could actually matter more than money. Timothy barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined tomorrow's newspaper, imagined Theodore Thornton reading the story, imagined the explosion of anger and legal threats that would follow. Part of him was terrified, but another part, a part that sounded like the woman in that old photograph, young and hopeful and brave, that part was ready. He got up at 5 in the morning, unable to stay in bed any longer. His mother was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at her phone. She looked tired but alert, more present than Timothy had seen her in years. "I've been looking at news websites," she said quietly. "Rachel's story isn't up yet." She said the morning edition. It's probably not online until later. They waited together in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the minutes tick by. At 6:15, Catherine's phone buzzed with an email notification. Her hands shook as she opened it. "It's from Rachel," she said. "She's sending us a preview of the story before it goes live." Timothy moved to stand behind his mother's chair, reading over her shoulder. The headline appeared on the screen, bold and uncompromising. "Billionaire's Dark Secret. Thornton Enterprises CEO accused of trying to buy child, retaliating against family." Below it was Rachel's byline, and then the story began. Timothy read it with growing amazement. Rachel had laid it all out. His mother's employment with Thornton, the pregnancy, Thornton's offer to adopt Timothy, Catherine's refusal, the termination of her employment, the decade of poverty that followed. She'd included excerpts from the documents, quotes from Catherine and Timothy, and a timeline that made Thornton's actions look exactly as predatory as they were. But the kicker, the part that made Timothy's breath catch, was the final section. When 10-year-old Timothy Ross discovered his mother's old wallet and learned the truth about his family's history with Thornton, he did what few adults would have the courage to do. He confronted the billionaire CEO directly. According to Timothy, Thornton offered him $5 million and private school education in exchange for his silence. "He wanted to buy me again," Timothy told his reporter, "just like he tried to buy me when I was a baby. He thinks everything can be solved with money." Less than 6 hours after Timothy's visit to Thornton Enterprises, the Department of Human Services received a complaint about Timothy's living conditions and initiated removal proceedings. When asked about the timing, DHS spokeswoman Maria Chin declined to comment on specific cases, but confirmed that the department received the complaint late Tuesday afternoon, exactly when Timothy would have been leaving Thornton's office. Theodore Thornton did not respond to multiple requests for comment. His attorney, Richard Hayes, issued a brief statement. Mr. Thornton categorically denies these allegations and is prepared to defend himself vigorously against what amounts to a malicious smear campaign. But the documents obtained by the Portland Tribune tell a different story, one of power wielded without accountability, of a wealthy man who believed he could buy anything, including someone else's child. And when a 10-year-old boy dared to say no, Thornton allegedly weaponized the very systems designed to protect children. The story continued with more details, more documentation, more damning evidence. It was thorough, professional, and devastating. "She did it," Catherine whispered. "She actually did it." Timothy's phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Story goes live in 15 minutes. Brace yourselves. This is going to be huge." They waited, watching the clock. At 6:30 exactly, Catherine refreshed the Portland Tribune's website on her phone. The story appeared at the top of the homepage, with the headline in large font and a photograph Rachel must have taken from public records. Theodore Thornton at some charity gala, smiling confidently at the camera, looking every inch the successful philanthropist. "It's real," Timothy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's actually real. People are going to know the truth." Within minutes, Catherine's phone started buzzing with notifications. The story was being shared on social media, picked up by other news outlets. By 7 o'clock, it was trending on Twitter. By 7:30, television news vans were pulling up outside their apartment building. Timothy looked out the window and saw them. Reporters with cameras, setting up on the sidewalk, talking into their phones. His neighbors were coming out of their apartments, confused by the commotion. "They're here," he said. Catherine stood beside him, looking at the scene below. "Are you ready for this?" "Are you?" She took a deep breath. "I haven't had a drink in 18 hours. That's the longest I've gone in 3 years. So yes, I think I'm ready." There was a knock at the door, not the harsh pounding of social services, but a polite, professional knock. Catherine opened it to find Rachel Winters standing there with a cameraman. "I know I should have called," Rachel said, "but every news outlet in the city is going to want an interview with you. I'd like to get yours first, if you're willing. Give you a chance to tell your story in your own words before it gets filtered through everyone else." Catherine looked at Timothy. He nodded. They did the interview right there in their small apartment, with its peeling walls and worn furniture, and all the evidence of their poverty on full display. Rachel didn't try to hide any of it. If anything, she made sure the camera captured it all, the reality of what Theodore Thornton's actions had cost him. Catherine spoke clearly, her voice steady, telling the story of a young woman who thought she had a good job and a bright future, until she got pregnant and her boss decided her baby would make a nice addition to his family. Timothy told his side, finding the wallet, confronting Thornton, refusing the money, facing the consequences. What do you want people to know? Rachel asked at the end of the interview. Catherine answered first. I want people to know that Theodore Thornton isn't the philanthropist he pretends to be. He's a man who tried to buy my child and then destroyed my life when I said no. He's a man who uses his power to hurt people who can't fight back. And I want people to know that we're done being silent. Timothy added, I want people to know that saying no to someone powerful is scary, but it's important. My mom said no 10 years ago, and I said no yesterday. And yeah, it cost us a lot, but we still have each other, and we still have the truth. And that matters more than his money. By the time the interview ended, there were at least a dozen news vans outside. Rachel helped them navigate through a crowd of reporters shouting questions, got them into her car, and drove them to a hotel downtown. You can't stay at your apartment right now, she explained. It's going to be a circus there for days. The Tribune is putting you up here, safe place where you can decompress and figure out your next steps. The hotel room was nicer than anywhere Timothy had ever stayed. 2 beds with clean sheets, a bathroom that wasn't moldy, a television that actually worked. Catherine sat on one of the beds, looking overwhelmed. What happens now? She asked Rachel. Now the lawyers start fighting. Thornton's team will try to discredit your story, claim you're lying or exaggerating or misremembering. But the documents don't lie, and we have those. They'll also probably sue for defamation, but the Tribune has excellent lawyers, and we stand by the story. Rachel's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, and her eyebrows raised. It's my editor. Hang on. She answered, listened for a moment, then said, You're kidding. Already? She listened more, then hung up. Her expression was somewhere between shocked and triumphant. What? Catherine asked. That was my editor. 3 more women have come forward in the last hour. Former employees of Thornton Enterprises. They all have stories about inappropriate behavior, pressure to quit when they got pregnant, hostile work environment. One of them says Thornton offered to adopt her child too. She was going to give the baby up for adoption anyway, and Thornton wanted to arrange it privately, off the books. She refused, and he fired her. Timothy felt something shift in his chest. Validation, maybe, or vindication. They weren't alone. This wasn't just their story. Thornton had done this before, to other women, other families. There's more, Rachel continued. The Attorney General's office just announced they're opening an investigation into Thornton Enterprises' employment practices. And the IRS is apparently taking a fresh look at some of his charitable foundations. Anonymous tip suggested financial irregularities. That's fast, Catherine said. That's what happens when you shine light on someone who's been operating in the shadows. All the other people he's hurt, all the other victims who were too scared to speak up, they see your courage and they find their own. Rachel smiled. You two just opened the floodgates. Over the next few hours, Timothy and his mother watched from their hotel room as their story exploded across the news cycle. Every channel was covering it. Social media was on fire with people sharing the article, debating the allegations, demanding accountability. Hashtag Thornton Scandal was trending nationally. But there was also a darker side. Thornton supporters were pushing back hard. Conservative commentators were calling a hit piece, suggesting Catherine was an unreliable alcoholic trying to shake down a successful businessman. Internet trolls were finding old photos of Catherine and making cruel jokes about her appearance, her poverty, her drinking. Don't read the comments, Rachel advised when she saw Timothy scrolling through Twitter. There will always be people who defend powerful men, no matter what they've done. Focus on the facts, not the noise. At 2 p.m, there was a knock on the hotel room door. Rachel answered it and stepped back to let in a woman in a business suit, professional, middle-aged, carrying a briefcase. Catherine Ross? Timothy Ross? My name is Linda Martinez. I'm an attorney specializing in employment law and civil rights. I've been following your story, and I'd like to offer my services pro bono. Catherine blinked. Pro bono? Free of charge. What Theodore Thornton did to you was illegal, wrongful termination, possibly coercion, definitely retaliation. And what he did to Timothy by weaponizing social services. That's abuse of the system. I want to help you sue him for everything he's worth. We can't afford a lawyer, Catherine said automatically. I know. That's why I said pro bono. Mrs. Ross, I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I've seen powerful men get away with terrible things because their victims couldn't afford to fight back. But your story, your courage in speaking out, it's inspired me, and I'm not the only one. I've already been contacted by 3 other attorneys who want to join the case. We're going to build a legal team, and we're going to make Theodore Thornton pay for what he did. Timothy watched his mother's face as Linda Martinez laid out the legal strategy: civil suit for wrongful termination and emotional distress, potential criminal charges if they could prove Thornton had made false reports to social services, discovery that would force Thornton to turn over decades of employment records that might reveal other victims. This could take years, Linda warned. Thornton will fight every step of the way. But we can win this. We have the evidence, we have public support, and most importantly, we have the truth. Catherine looked at Timothy. He saw tears in her eyes, but they weren't the sad tears he was used to. These were different. I haven't been a good mother to you, she said quietly. I let the drinking take over. I let his actions break me. But you were braver than I ever was. You stood up to him when I couldn't. You made our story matter. You kept me, Timothy said simply. That's all that matters. You could have taken his money and let him adopt me, and your life would have been so much easier. But you said no. You chose me over everything else. That's the bravest thing anyone's ever done. Catherine pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. Over her shoulder, Timothy saw Linda Martinez and Rachel Winters exchange a glance. 2 professional women who'd seen their share of human suffering but were clearly moved by this moment. So what do you say, Mrs. Ross? Linda asked, Will you let us represent you? Catherine pulled back from the hug, wiping her eyes. On one condition. I want to go to rehab. Real rehab, not just some court-ordered program. I want to get sober and stay sober. Because Timothy deserves a real mother, not the mess I've been. I can help with that too, Linda said. I have contacts at some excellent facilities. We can get you enrolled as soon as you're ready. I'm ready now. Things moved quickly after that. Linda made calls, pulled strings, used her connections. By that evening, Catherine was enrolled in a 30-day residential treatment program at a facility in Eugene, about 2 hours south of Portland. It was one of the best in the state. And through a combination of Linda's negotiations and a sudden anonymous donation to the facility, it wouldn't cost them anything. Anonymous donation? Timothy asked suspiciously when Rachel told them. Rachel smiled. Once your story went public, the Tribune's tip line exploded. People want to help. One donor, who wishes to remain anonymous, specifically asked that their contribution go toward getting your mother the help she needs. Timothy suspected it was Mrs. Patterson from the library, or maybe Mr. Chun from the grocery store, or perhaps someone else from their neighborhood who'd watched them struggle and finally had a way to help. It didn't matter who. What mattered was that his mother was going to get treatment. The question now was, what about Timothy? Normally, you'd go into foster care while your mother is in treatment, Linda explained. But given the circumstances, given that Thornton weaponized the foster care system against you, I filed an emergency motion for alternative placement. I'm asking the court to let you stay with a temporary guardian of your choosing instead. Who would that be? Timothy asked. We don't have any family. What about me? They all turned to look at Rachel Winters. She shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. I know it's unconventional. I'm a journalist who's reporting on your story, so there are ethical considerations. But I'm also a licensed foster parent. I used to do emergency placements before my career got too busy, and I have a spare bedroom. And honestly, I don't trust the regular foster system with you right now, not when there's a chance Thornton might have connections there. Timothy looked at Rachel. This woman he'd only met yesterday, who believed their story when she had every reason to be skeptical, who'd turned their private pain into public accountability. Would that be okay? He asked his mother. Catherine studied Rachel carefully. You'd take care of my son? Keep him safe while I'm getting help? I'd do my best. And it's only temporary, just until you complete treatment and the court is satisfied that you're ready to have Timothy back. What about the social worker? Timothy asked. Patricia Kimball. She was coming today to take me to foster care. Linda smiled grimly. Miss Kimball has been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation into how she received a complaint about your family. The timing was too coincidental, and the Attorney General's office wants to know if Thornton or someone on his behalf improperly influenced a state agency. As for your placement, I'm confident the judge will approve Rachel as your temporary guardian, especially given the circumstances. Everything was happening so fast. Yesterday, Timothy had been a poor kid living in a moldy apartment with an alcoholic mother. Today, he was at the center of a national news story. His mother was going to rehab, and he was about to move in with a journalist who turned their tragedy into a weapon against one of Portland's most powerful men. That night, Catherine left for the treatment facility in Eugene. Timothy hugged her goodbye in the hotel lobby, fighting back tears. 30 days, she promised him. 30 days, and I'll be sober and healthy and ready to be your real mom again. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. More than anything. And I'm so proud of you. You did what I should have done 10 years ago. You fought back. You didn't let him win. Timothy watched his mother get into Linda's car and drive away. Then he turned to Rachel. Ready to see a new temporary home? She asked. Rachel's apartment was in the Pearl District, a renovated loft with exposed brick walls and big windows overlooking the city. It was clean and organized and full of books. So many books that Timothy felt immediately more comfortable. The spare bedroom is through there, Rachel said, pointing. It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need it. Bathroom is shared. I'm not home much anyway, so you'll have plenty of privacy. House rules are simple. Be honest with me. Do your homework, and no sneaking out at night to confront billionaires without telling me first. Timothy managed a small smile at that last one. That night, lying in a real bed in a warm room that didn't smell like mold or alcohol, Timothy thought about everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. He'd found a wallet, confronted a billionaire, told a journalist a story, and watched that story explode into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. His phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. You made a mistake, kid. A very expensive mistake. You're going to regret this. Timothy showed the text to Rachel. Her expression hardened. Forward that to Linda and to me, and then block the number. Thornton's trying to intimidate you, but he can't touch you anymore. The whole world is watching now. But as Timothy lay in the darkness, he wondered if Rachel was right. Theodore Thornton had lost the first battle, the battle of public opinion. But men like him didn't stay down. They had resources, connections, lawyers, ways of hurting people that didn't leave obvious marks. What do you think? Can Timothy and his mother really win against someone as powerful as Theodore Thornton? Or are they fighting a battle they can't possibly win? Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. The fight was just beginning, and Timothy had a feeling that before it was over, things were going to get much worse before they got better. But for tonight, for this one night, he was safe and warm and no longer alone. And sometimes that was enough.